On number 5, it says discussion on not using Google Doc or Google for violating open meetings. The committee will bring suggested edits to the meeting to discuss.
Oh, very bottom. Yeah, okay, I see it's trend.
So maybe that kind of cancels out what it. So did you saw all those edits then that Melissa put in there, right? Steve?
Which
She
one?
put in the edits from the strategic plan.
I did, but I'm having trouble.
See what was there. She did.
Hold on. Can you hear me, Ingrid?
Mama.
For the final stage.
Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Is it on? Oh. Call the meeting to order then. Clint, I saw your proof of notification email. Good on number 2. So I would take a motion for an approval of the agenda. A second?
Jerry Severson seconds.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, and then approval of previous minutes. Comments on those minutes?
Move for approval.
Motion by Carrie,
Second would be appropriate. Steve Carroll seconds.
okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, discussion and possible action on strategic priorities and values. Oh, I'm sorry. Melissa, can you hear me okay?
You're just fine.
Okay, good. So for this agenda item, I'm looking at number 6. Okay, strategic priorities and values. This one is referring to the email that we sent out to EMS, HHS, and what was the third one?
Extension.
Like an extension.
Yeah, and so we didn't receive a response from the extension, but we did get responses from Tracy and Darren. So those were in the folders. So I guess I want to hear some thoughts or comments on their responses and whether or not we need to change our questions before we solicit answers from the rest of the department head.
I'm not able to bring up my folders because they're being synced right now. I'll speak to Tracy's first.
Okay.
And she makes a good point. These were pretty broad, general concepts we were asking them to respond to, and so they almost had to respond in a broad, general sense. But she did make a couple good points, and so they can be a jumping off part. I think if we roll this out to all the other departments, we might want to find some ways to bring more focus to what they come back with.
I agree with that. My struggle is how do we focus our questions a little bit more? What are we trying to solicit? Oh, Sarah, Carrie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I can't, sync.
Do you want to see my iPad? Melissa frozen? Ah, I'm sorry. I'm not very good with the mics. We'll do better. Okay, Melissa, did you have any thoughts on the emails that we received?
Sorry, our business phone is ringing in the background here. I guess I'm of two minds. I on the one hand, yeah, it would be good to have some more specific questions, but a part of me, on the other hand, kind of wants to see what the departments come back with it being open-ended like that. Maybe that wastes a little time though. So, I guess I could go either way. Although I'm not quite sure what specifically we want to ask because each department is different. And if we were going to do specific questions, it might differ from department to department too. So I don't know.
Did you feel that there was anything specifically, and for example, we'll start with Tracy's email, that we could, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of what we were looking for was something that we could add into the work plan, or at least specify it a little bit more, make it more specific per department. Did you feel like we could utilize what she sent back? I know she mentioned time tracking.
Yeah, in the payroll and accounting system, if we were going to move forward with getting a different system, they would like a better. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things I do worry about leaving it so open is I don't want them to just say, everything we do is mandated. We don't need to change anything. You know, I mean that, so I don't, maybe we just need to have more specific instructions, not necessarily specific questions, but more specific instructions.
Okay, I'm trying to find my email.
Another thing I noted from Tracy's response is that, again, she mentioned software, but maybe for us to take that in a more general way is that one way of improving is to really think about technology and those kind of things that maybe we do need to do a review and really recognize that as a way to improve our effectiveness. I know that we're always trying to do that, but just recognize it as a big leveraging tool.
Okay, well, let's talk about Darren's email and then we can discuss if we're gonna change the wording, how we'll change that. So with Darren's, did you guys have any thoughts on how we could apply what he sent?
His
Oh,
focused a lot
sorry.
more on the financial stresses and the ability to do all the services that we want to provide. So I didn't really get anything I felt I could act on from that. We kind of know that money's tight. He's making the case that his department's critical and don't forget us. But I didn't know what to do with that statement.
I would agree. I thought that there was some good information in there. And he raised some questions that I think have been thought about before, like how do we address this district, the ambulance, and etc. But I personally didn't see something that specifically would fit into what we were looking for right now for this discussion. Melissa?
So I think that he didn't in so many words say it, but it does sound like one of the things I took from it was that, you know, maybe part of our strategic plan, we do need to have a serious discussion about a, you know, countywide ambulance service that encompasses all of the individual ambulance services that we have. So I mean, that's what I took from it, is that that was a potential area that he thought can and should be a part of our plan. But so I think what I'm getting from what you guys are saying and from reading these responses is that I do think that we need to be more specific in our instructions, and that we are asking them to come up with goals for our strategic plan that are specific to their department that we as a county board may not have thought of on our own. I mean, wasn't that kind of what we started out with as our primary goal, was to get information and input from the departments about specific goals that pertain to their department that should be incorporated into our plan? And I don't think that came through in how we asked them to answer these questions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Would you, Clint, would you be able, I'm sorry, I know I make you jump all over in there. Would you be able to pull up that email that we did send with the two questions?
Can, Madam Chair, just give me a second
Okay.
to track it down.
And Melissa, I agree with that as well. As far as the discussion with the ambulance, I think that could fit in there. I don't know that that would go directly on I think that's a bigger question than a smaller goal.
Well, maybe. I mean, I don't know that we want to limit ourselves to small goals necessarily. And he's not wrong. You know, I mean, I know all of the ambulance services, well, everyone is struggling to find staff. And I think maybe one of his subpoints was that because the county ambulance has the ability to pay their people, where the other ones are all on volunteer basis and they can't get volunteers anymore. So, I mean, I think that there's that even though it's a big goal, it's probably because we are obligated to provide. So if these other ones go out and can't get volunteers and so they don't function anymore, it would fall to the county to provide that service. At least that's my understanding of how the statute is written. So I don't think we should be afraid to have big goals in our plan. I know we're trying to micro focus and, really just take on what we can and not overdo ourselves and, then get overwhelmed and not get anything accomplished. But there are some pretty big things on the horizon that we should start talking about now before it becomes a crisis, I guess is my thought on that.
Thanks. Carrie or Clint, did you guys have any thoughts on either of those responses?
I guess I'm of the mindset too, where if when we approaching departments, I think kind of has to then be kind of a top-down kind of approach too on these are our values, these are our cores. How does it impact you, and how should your work plan and your individual department strategic plan support these types of initiatives? I think like the feedback we got back and the 2 questions to there's still value of it because essentially it's saying we don't have anything that we're doing that contradicts these things that you have in place. And if you want to know how it changes, well, we need a little bit more context on what direction you're going in order for us to say if it's how we're going to maneuver and do things differently based on those types of things, because they are very, very, very broad. So it's really kind of just setting pillars. So I think trying to expect departments to kind of know what we're wanting to get from them is going to be a challenge on such a big spectrum.
Okay, I see he's got that pulled up here. So currently our 2 questions that we were asking after we outlined, what our strategic priorities and what our core values were. Our current questions were, what functions and services, if any, is your department performing that do not align with these strategic priorities and core values? And then number 2 is, what operations or procedure changes would you plan on implementing to help your functions and projects better align with these strategic priorities and core values? So as has been stated, they're broad. I think we need to better define, okay, what exactly are we trying to pull out here? How do we make those more specific?
I'm struck by the parallel here with the current budget cycle, where each department came in and explained their budget needs for the coming year, what might be a wish they could, if they had more money, or what would they do if the budget was trimmed or held level. In a way, it kind of similar to this, where we're trying to prioritize what's most important and kind of look to the future a little bit. But maybe something like that, where we ask the departments, hey, what are goals that you would like to be able to do in the next 5-10 years? And something like that might bring new ideas we haven't yet heard about. They're more detailed to each department.
I think in context of the day-to-day activities, and in probably more so in context of the discussions and the very hard decisions we make on trying to prioritize services, trying to prioritize expenditures, I think it's probably important too to see that the document we have in hand is probably going to be used almost as a hindsight justification for which side of the table you're on, depending on whatever issue is brought before a body. That makes sense. So if we're talking about whether or not we want to fund an administrator's office, when we're lining up toe-to-toe on what line you stand on that issue, then we're going to grab this document and we're going to start pointing to it and say, does it align with my goals or my priorities, and matching it based on that issue. So for departments, I kind of see then 2 of, we might have to go down the road further, just kind of push forward with, these seem like reasonable goals, these seem like reasonable priorities, as we get more into the direction then of where the county board wants to go and the different priorities, the actual kind of more quantified priorities that you have in place. You kind of reach the end result of, now we have something we're going to take to the county board, or closer to that aspect. Then I think we reach out to departments and say, how is this document going to be used to either promote your services, or how is this document going to be used to try to reduce your services and funding's going towards your efforts, might lead to a more kind of a fruitful, visualized conversation. That would be my thoughts.
So if what you're saying is then that perhaps we're being premature with this, that maybe we need to do a little bit more groundwork here before we solicit.
Possibly. I think you may have also had an effective piloting because nobody came back and really said, hey, this is a showstopper for me and this is out of context. And, I think it was just, is this, you see anything here that's going to be detrimental to stopping your operation? And I didn't get that feel. There were concerns that were raised for it. But again, I guess I kind of see this document is, it sets guides for us, but where I see it being referenced is when we hit decision points. Now we're looking to, to justify our positions on how we feel about an issue. Is that fair to say, Troy, on how you've seen strategic plans kind of used as you hitting decision points? And now does our plan back here, does it support what we want to do or what we not want to do?
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, I would agree. I haven't heard of a strategic plan being an afterthought so much as a guide that's there with you, but that's semantics. I think a sounding board is what you're looking at. And, I saw the word roadmap in here. To me, it's more of a guide. I mean, if the roadmap gets you to a place you know where to be and you know that place exists. You don't necessarily know, you kind of know where you want to be, but there's a lot of variability. So the most powerful thing an organization can be right now is adaptive, nimble. So this is the thing that'll give you that guide. Yeah. The one thing, if I may, Madam Chair, in Tracy's person's response here, it struck me as she's already thinking about she's already implementing some of it. So she talks about time tracking, not because she needs software, but she's going to use that to track costs and recover costs, presumably from federal grants or something, either directly or through an indirect rate. So number one, she's already there, which is wonderful. They're pursuing recovering funds. This, though, it could be if you reframe it slightly to ask for specific projects, you could start building out a peer learning group. Are there other entities that get federal funding that maybe could learn from what Tracy's doing? If you have a series of projects that they come back with you and say, here's what we're doing that aligns. Could be a way to capture those best practices already in the county you may not know about.
Do you think that it would be, I guess, do you kind of agree with Clint's assessment then that we could continue with what we're doing and then perhaps bring in these kinds of, or maybe more specific questions later from department heads?
I think it depends on what next step it is with engaging department heads. My sense is this is core values and strategic priorities. And so if there's a next step, I guess maybe that's a good point. Is if you want to get into the details, it could happen the next step, but the next step should also be informed by what's going on to some degree. My sense is there's probably a lot happening at the department level that we're not fully aware of. So this could be a wonderful way to capture that information and inform the best way to reach out. That makes sense. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I don't know what the next step is to reaching out to departments, so I'm a bit of a loss to specifically how to respond, but it seems a great opportunity to hear what's going on.
I think that, again, for this initial connection with the departments, these stay general, but if we try to use the same strategic priorities and core values and start getting more detail, I think it may be too blunt an instrument. Where how do you say whether this software is going to be better or worse for accountability? How do you it starts getting into the weeds pretty quick, and so using these as a kind of a touchstone, is this a good choice or not, might be hard to do. So I'm thinking somehow we need to make this roll to the next level of detail with maybe some other work on our part.
Okay, so then thoughts on sending it out again, the same department wide, or changing it to be more specific, or tabling it until we've gone to some of the other parts. We still need to discuss, I mean, as you can see on the agenda, we haven't even gone through all of the strategic plan and the edits as a group yet. So do we want to table this until we've gotten further, or do we want to resend this out? Melissa, do you have any input?
Sorry, I wouldn't unmute. I don't know. I can see benefits both ways. I mean, on the one hand, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to create busy work for our department heads. So that's always my big concern. I want to make sure that when we ask for their input, we're not going to come back asking them, a million times because we decided we asked the wrong thing. So, I mean, I would be okay with kind of getting through some of the edits that we've made so far, and just to make sure that we kind of are all on the same page, and to see if there's anything more specific we want to try to add. But again, I still feel like, just getting some general input from both the ones that we already got. I think I don't know about you guys, but for me, it helps me just kind of think about the county as a whole and where we want to go. So I don't know. I'm not being very helpful, am I?
Well, maybe,
I think I think a slight delay would be okay, but I wouldn't want to wait too long, because I do feel like I would like to know what they think as we're developing this, so that we don't get all the way done developing it and then we ask them these questions and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of things that come up that we didn't think about that should have been a priority for us. So.
Well, as Clint pointed out, the one thing that we did get from this pilot was that neither of them completely disagreed with our strategic priorities or our core values. I mean,
Right.
they both said this aligns with what we're already doing. So I know that was only 2 responses, but I guess I would kind of agree that maybe we at least try to get through some of the edits in our plan and make sure that we're on the same page, and then we could come back and see if we want to make that more specific. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, just as long as it's not too much of a delay is what I'm thinking. A little delay, but not a lot delay.
Okay, well, as we've already said, we're probably going to need to be meeting about bi-weekly anyways, so perhaps by next meeting for sure we can make a decision on that.
let me ask this. I mean, if we, let me see if I understand where we're heading here. If we say, okay, these general questions are okay to roll out to everyone else, but in order to go to the next step, maybe we do finish as a committee thrashing out the wording in our documents, and maybe that's what you roll out for the next level to all the departments, and that way we're saying this is not a final document yet. We've gone this far, but we want your input for one more last round of adjusting. And then that, because it's more detailed, we might also get more detailed stuff we didn't know about.
That's a good point. It is a big document for a department to go through, which is not bad. I'm just saying I would agree. We just need to be careful on what are we asking them to do, like Melissa mentioned, which I thought was a good point. We don't want to create busy work, but I would say let's move on to number 6 and at least see where we're at. So number 6 is discussion and possible action regarding edits to the proposed strategic plan. My question for the committee would be, what version would you like on the screen? I think you guys all have your iPads, so you can see both anyways. We have yes.
I just was going to say that I have the Word documents on my computer, so I can actually make changes as we agree on changes, so that the administrator doesn't have to try to do that later, if that's all right.
Sounds great to me. Clint,
Okay.
you're good? Okay. Yay. Okay. So I personally kind of like the one where we can see the comments on the side, but if you guys prefer the inline, I'm totally, whichever one makes more sense to share.
So I thought Melissa was going to share her screen and do it from her computer. Is that what I understood?
I don't know if she can do that. I think she's just going to make changes if we make changes to the edits, and then we'll upload that file later.
Yeah, because I'm on by WebEx on my iPad, so that I can see my computer while I work, so I can't share my screen at the same time.
Well, I guess, Melissa, I know you typed up most of these. Which do you think is the better version here that,
So, I mean, I personally like where the comments are visible on the side. And so how I handled it in the Administrative Transition Committee, for anyone who is on that committee, I mean, generally what we did is, well, because I was chair of that, I would go through and I would read any changes that we made and, and discuss what was deleted or changed. And then we would decide kind of at each point, we decided whether we liked it or didn't like it, and just move through the document that way. And that seemed to work pretty well. But if someone wants to do it a different way, that obviously I'm open to that as well.
Melissa, would you mind reading through it then? You had prepared the documents. I think it makes the most sense.
Sure, that's fine. Can everyone
Okay.
hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So in the very first thing we started talking about was that we kind of didn't like the opportunities and challenges title. And so we changed it to strategic plan framework. So I guess the first question is, does anyone have any problem with changing that language?
I don't.
Okay. So I guess when I don't hear anything, I'm just going to assume that it's going to stay. Is that how we're going to do it?
And I would add, I think the reason why we did that was simply because we felt like it made more sense to someone reading through like what we were trying to do here.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And so one of the first things that we thought was important for people reading this document was explaining why we're going through this process and why it matters. And so I just simply Googled, you know, why is the strategic plan important? And this was a paragraph that came up. So the language in this is taken directly from the web, and it certainly can change. Any of the language can change to what anyone wants, but this was just something that I found that I thought was pretty concise. I didn't want it to be too lengthy. So that's, if anyone has any comments on the definition of why strategic planning is important.
I like it.
I know Troy mentioned you thought instead of roadmap, you thought guide was a better word. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do, but maybe that's semantics. Whatever the committee's happy with.
I mean, I'm certainly okay with changing it to guide.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, so I'm changing that sentence to read, strategic planning is the process by which leaders of an organization determine what it intends to be in the future and how it will get there. A strategic plan serves as a community's guide and is used to prioritize initiative, resources, goals, and department operations and projects. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so then this next paragraph is where the original document started. And so all I did was, we wanted to have, at first, SWAT and PEST were not, the acronyms were not written out. So we just added the language so that people would know what they stand for. And then the next thing that we talked about was potentially inserting some kind of organizational chart of Richland County Administration of Government to help not only our constituents, but also our department heads, our employees understand how complex our government is and what all it includes. Just so that people understand how many different things our county government is involved in. And so the one that's up there, this is Iowa County's organizational chart, and I did contact them, and they made this with their GIS mapping people did this organizational chart. And so I believe that and they were willing to speak with our GIS people to explain to them how they did it. So we could, as a committee, ask for them to create this same document, but specific to Richland County, if we were to decide this is a format we like. I guess what I liked about it was that it's one page, it fits, you can read it pretty well. It's, I like the different colors that sort of break out the levels of the different levels of bodies involved. But obviously we could choose, there's a zillion different ways that these can be created and a million formats. And so, obviously we could choose any one of those. I just like this one because it it literally prints on one page, which it's almost impossible to have a decent.
I'm seeing in chat that apparently it has been done, but I don't know where it exists or what it's being used for, but maybe that's already taken care of.
So the one that, I saw the chat flash up, but I didn't read what it said, all of it. But I know that when we went through the administrative transition committee process, not the administration, when we were trying to decide what type of administration we wanted, we went through a process of trying to develop an organizational chart. And so they did develop one that was very complex and big and had to be printed out on 25 different pages. If that's the one they're referring to, then I would say that it was fine, except that you couldn't. A normal person would never be able to print that and look at it, or it was hard to see on one screen, I guess was my point. But maybe there's a different one that I don't know about. So we'd have to find out from us. But anyway, I guess what we need to talk about
Melissa?
here. What?
I think Mr. Langrick has a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I guess too, I don't know if the vision is, I want to just confirm that the one that is probably out there that is a lot more horizontal than vertical, I'm assuming, with many, if you will, to avoid the overused metaphor of silos, is probably what more it looks like, might accurately describe what we're having. So I don't know if this is an opportunity then to say, this is what it looks like, and this is what we want it to move to. Might also be another thought of interjecting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can I talk?
Yes, please.
Sorry. I think there's two questions here. One is this where we should be, is this the body or the group that should be figuring out an organizational chart? I mean, I'm not quite sure who else it would fall under as far as other committees. So, and two, the other question is it important to include it in this document? I know in our discussions with the group that went through this, that developed all these edits that we're looking at right now, our thing was, really trying to help the public understand how complicated county government is and how it all interacts together. So, and I agree with that. I was one of the people that felt like it was important to make sure everyone understands, not just our constituents, but also our department heads, understanding that, as county board supervisors, we have to make decisions based on what's best for the whole and not just one particular department. So, but I'd be interested to know if other people agree that it should be included in this document. And then to Clint's question as to whether this body would also then determine how we can make our government less silos and more broad. So,
Melissa,
yeah.
First, I just want to ask, where is that chart located? I feel like I have seen it at one point. I'm assuming it's in.
Isn't it in the
do you know?
document he just had on the screen?
Oh, did you have it up? And
Yeah,
didn't
it's
see it?
up. It's
No,
right
no,
there.
no. I'm not talking about Iowa counties. I'm talking about the one that MIS developed.
Oh yeah, I have no idea where that is. I don't think it's anywhere public that I know of.
Anyway,
But I could be
I
wrong.
would second what Melissa said, that this visualization, I think, would be fine. I think it'd be fine to put it in the document.
Okay.
It sounds like
but
Barb is
she-
saying they can send it to us on the chat.
That would be great, Barb. Thank you. But that's going to be a whole nother discussion then. Are we going to be, are we going to utilize it as is? Are we going to try to rework it? That's another.
We'll have to look
Why
at
don't
it
we could set it aside to have a discussion its own discussion at a separate time.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, do we think that there's value in having some sort of org chart for our county in this?
I do.
I do.
All right, well then we will look at that when we talk about future agenda items. Thank you, Barb, for sending that to us. Okay, I guess we keep going then. Melissa, you're muted.
So the next part of the plan gets to strategic priorities, and we talked about those last time and made the changes. which I did not record last time, so I'll have to get those from, well, I can get it from the email that was sent out because you did include the edited changes in that email. So we don't need to talk about those today because we've already talked about our strategic priorities and our core values. So I'm going to skip that. So the next section is our mission and vision statements. So, all right, so what we did originally was there was language that said the following mission and vision statements were drafted during the strategic planning process due to the nature of the current challenges facing the county. We deleted that because we didn't feel that that was necessary to be in our final version of our strategic plan. And so we just left, the original one was Richland County will think strategically and anticipate the future, ensuring that the decisions made today will have lasting value and provide fiscal solvency. And I won't read the rest of that sentence. But we also had, and I believe that Steve Carroll was the one that came up with this one, that we also felt was a really good mission statement, that Richland County will foster a stable and adequate tax such that services to the community are financially sound. With this base, the community will strive to continually improve its wisest use of tax revenues to provide services for the common good. So I guess at this point we should talk about the two options there, and then whether there's a third one that anyone wants to offer. I'm fine with this. I'm fine with either of them, but I think the second one is good. I think it's a little more focused and more specific, and I think that that's okay given that we've discussed trying to be very inwardly focused, on our services and our tax base. So anyway, I would open up to anyone else's thoughts.
I think that when we talk about mission and vision things, I'm always nervous about just repeating motherhood and apple pie, and I like things that are a little more specific or even measurable, so that you can say whether you've met your mission or not. And so that's why I kind of lean towards the second one.
My question is it so focused that it's limiting? Do we think that at all? I mean, I don't dislike it. I said I don't dislike it. The second statement, I was just asking if it's, I agree that it's definitely more focused. My question was, are we being too focused with it?
Right. Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I mean, I do like the sentence in the first one of the needs of individuals will be respected while recognizing responsibility to the community as a whole, only because I think that, there are constituents and departments and whatever, they think that their issues are very important. And I don't think it's a terrible thing to remind people that we are responsible for the body as a whole, not just an individual part. And so we always have to take that into consideration. And considering that we're now going to be talking about using our strategic plan to identify where our priorities should be financially as far as cutting programs or keeping programs, I would say that sentence, that's a sentence that speaks to me in that decision-making process.
Could we not just snip that and put it on in the alternate one?
Yeah, that's what that's what I was thinking. I was trying to figure out where it would make sense to put it, like after the first sentence. But no, I think the second.
Difficult, but I'm kind of partial to the first sentence of the original mission as well. And I guess the reason why I say that is I feel like that allows, because we're not just talking about tax base. I mean, obviously we need to focus on that, but I guess, I don't know, I just really like that the decisions, specifically the part where it says the decisions made today will have lasting value and provide fiscal solvency. I think that that's a really good statement to make.
I mean, and it does speak to being, a stable and adequate tax base, and I mean, what if we said, Richland County will foster a stable and adequate tax base such that services to the community are financially sound, ensuring that the decisions made today will have lasting value and provide fiscal solvency. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, Troy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. The only thing that I don't see in the second sentence, or, well, the thing that doesn't jump out to me, there's no statement of quality or value. I like the word value myself, but looking only at how much we spend, could overlook quality of service. And Department of Children and Family Services doesn't want to be the cheapest. Probably hurt kids if we cut our costs there, right? So I don't know how to balance that, but there's nothing about quality or value in the second one outside of cost necessarily. I'm sure it's embedded in there, but just a thought that it may be stated more clearly.
Could we just say, in that last sentence, the county will strive to continually improve its wisest use of tax revenues to provide quality services for the common good?
Does that capture the same thought that you feel like the first one does?
I like value because it's more subjective to some degree.
Uh-huh.
People live in incredibly expensive areas that I would never choose to live in, but they value it, right? So
Provide
also
valuable services?
Well, the first statement, though, is talking about the decisions that we're making, that they have value. And so that doesn't always mean specifically that a decision is going to be all about finances. Sometimes value might outweigh finances, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, Troy.
yeah, I think that came out during our meetings, is conversations to some degree, and that's why I repeat it here. Is I think that did come up through our meetings. Is thinking also about quality and value.
What if we deleted the last sentence of the first one, the vital community involvement in decision making, got rid of that sentence and then added the alternative one right to there. So we're deleting one sentence and adding two, so we have one more sentence then. I mean, it's a little long, but I think that's okay. Does that make sense? So it would read, Richland County will think strategically and anticipate the future, ensuring that the decisions made today will have lasting value and provide fiscal solvency. The needs of individuals will be respected while recognizing responsibility to the community as a whole. Richland County will foster a stable and adequate tax base such that services to the community are financially sound. With this base, the county will strive to continually improve its wisest use of tax revenues to provide services for the common good. That's a little wordy, but yes, no?
I could live with that. It's a little long, but I could live with that.
I mean, I could put the
And
two of them
thought
together
like,
and then, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I don't want to belabor this. I just feel like maybe if we put them all together like that, the second two are really just stating in a slightly different, there's just slight difference. It's basically, it could be come off a little redundant.
What I was going to say, Madam Chair, is what if I take these two statements and try to integrate them and we could look at them again next time instead of trying to beat it to death here?
That, you guys good with that?
I'm fine with that.
I mean, not that we won't, obviously we can make changes then too, but maybe I'll think about it a little bit, see if I can put the two together. Or if anyone else has a way to put the two together and wants to send them, we can then just talk about it the next time.
There you go. There's some homework for everybody. Mesh the two statements together. Best
Okay.
one wins.
All right, so let's move on to vision statement then. All right, so the original one was Richland County will be a vibrant place where people love life, enjoy work, and are empowered to raise vibrant families. And so the group that met before, we talked about changing it to Richland County will be a leader for resilient rural communities and a place where people love life, enjoy work, and are empowered to raise thriving families. And then we also had another version, which was to achieve a resilient local economy where housing, jobs, and population are in balance and natural resources and amenities are preserved such that Richland County is a good place to live now and far into the future. I have to say, I really like the second one. I think it says they say the same thing, but I like the wording of the second one, but obviously I can go either way too.
I think the second one brings just a couple more aspects into it, which I like.
I think the first one to me sounds, I like the way the first one is worded. I think that it sounds a little more, what am I trying to say? Basically, the second one maybe has more specific, achievable like statements in there, whereas the first one has a little bit broader, but I kind of like the way the first one's worded, so I'm not being very helpful. Carrie, did you have a comment on the one before? I feel bad if we skipped over what you were going to say. Okay. You have a comment on this one?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Was he talking? I didn't hear anything.
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat that, Carrie.
I like
don't-
both of them. I just don't think that we need resilient or vibrant in vision thing. And just, it could say Richland County will be a leader for rural counties. You don't need to doctor it up and put filler words in, I guess.
Well, vibrant was deleted. And I
know,
guess
see
my
that.
only comment on that would be if we're saying a leader for rural counties, in what way are we being a leader? And I think that's what the resilient was trying to capture, was that rural counties have challenges facing them, dropping population only being one of them. So what is our response to that? How do we, what are we trying to be a leader in? But, so do you prefer the first or the second one?
I like a little bit of both of them.
Well, we're running into the same problem, Melissa.
Do you want me to try to put the two of them together and see what I can come up with? And anyone else could do the same thing and we'll go from there.
Clint and Troy, do you have any thoughts on either of our statements?
I have to say I'm not good at wordsmithing. I'll express thoughts, but then the actual final wording I'm terrible at.
I
The
guess
only thing I had, and it came up during the meeting as well, yeah, to achieve a resilient local economy. One of the things, and it might have been your comment, was what can the county government do to achieve that? So I wonder if maybe to enable and contribute to the local economy. Because there's inherent limitations on county government to building the economy. That's heavily a private sector thing, but strong roads, good law enforcement, those sort of things that enable community growth. It's splitting hairs. To me, it clarifies the county's role a little more, county government's role.
I think that's a good comment. Maybe make note of that, Melissa.
I did.
yes, I concur with our position to try to facilitate and foster other types of functions. I guess overall, too, as we try to boil down the mission statement, I see some of the things perhaps in the mission statement that if we wanted to thin that out could be added down into the more robust vision statement, if that's.
What were
Hope
you
that really
thinking?
helps.
Like just as an example?
I guess I lean back to my military days of where a mission was pretty much specific to answering the
like
five
short.
W's. Yes, and then you had commander's intent or some other type of statement past that that kind of gave you the little bit broader thing of what the end state should try to look like. Between the two, yeah, I think they're 6 one, half dozen the other way. It really, I guess I would probably hinge back on Troy's comments of trying to make it more of a vision of facilitating and of fostering other types of functions, keeping in mind that we're very service provided.
So if that's the case, which actually that makes sense to me, making the mission statement more short, what if we took the parts of that alternate mission statement, like I know we mentioned cutting off, and I'm sorry, we're kind of going backwards here, but I know we mentioned taking off that last statement on the mission where it said vital community involvement from there to the period. What if we just had the first couple of statements as our mission statement and then included the parts that we liked in that alternate mission statement
that are a bit more specific, including them and somehow into the vision statement.
Which pieces?
Okay, so where the mission and vision, where it says the original mission and then where it has the alternate mission statement. But what if we did something like taking what we liked in that alternate mission statement? Because remember how Melissa mentioned putting the two together, like the first two sentences of the first one, and then just adding on the second alternate mission statement. My question is, what if we just leave the first two sentences of the original mission statement as our mission, or potentially, and then take the alternate mission statement and flesh out our vision statement a little bit more?
I can try and do that.
Do you think that makes sense?
I do. I mean, I guess I don't really know like which one should be longer or shorter, which one is more specific. I should go back and read the definition of what a mission and a vision statements are supposed to say. But it makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, I can try and work it both ways, and then we can see what we like.
All right, so I guess we'll relook at that next time so we can move on to focus.
Okay, so now it gets a little bit tricky because we moved. We moved a section, I believe, here. We decided that we wanted to include our strengths first and then talk about our challenges. We wanted to add language that the challenges inform our plan and so in the comments, I'm reading one of the comments on the right, comment 10. And these are just, I just want to go through these because this was our thought process when we were talking about this, that, our strength is our increasing fund balance, our rich natural resources, outdoor recreation, dedicated staff, community investment, younger people involved in government, investment in economic development. These were all things that we came up with that we're talking about our strengths. And so we didn't add language into this document to do that though. And so do we want to talk about our strengths first before we jump right into all of the million problems we have facing us? Or do we think that we really just want to focus on where our challenges are and what we need to do? So I think before we go, too much further, we need to really decide that. Are we going to, that was one of the reasons why we changed some of the language at the beginning, because we thought it sounded a little negative, in our, when we did our strategic goals. And so I guess what we need to talk about right now is whether or not we want to talk at all about our strengths, or do we just want to focus on our myriad of problems that we have?
I think somewhere in here, it's more important to make the case and kind of sound, the concern. So I think focus, meaning that we have to prioritize, really is important. I don't mind if we add some strengths we think will help us do that, but the main reason this section's here is to make the case for doing certain things. So yeah,
Well,
it should be, a quick comment on the challenges.
I think what we were saying was that there might be a section ahead of focus that would talk specifically about our strengths, and then we would move into focus where we would talk about where we need to be focusing our efforts in the future because of the problems that we have.
Right. I'm just saying I would make the strengths very high level and brief, and make sure the focus has some punch.
I guess one of the questions that comes to my mind is, what is the main target audience for this strategic plan? That's a question for Troy, but I mean, I know that the idea is that it's informing the decisions we make as a county. So therefore, is it us as county government and then county employees that are the main target audience here?
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
Okay.
Then also your partners in these sort of ancillary initiatives, the other, not, non-mandatory county government stuff, but those things you're part of.
Right.
Uh,
I know when we were having this discussion, we were talking a little bit about, what the impression or what are we putting forward if somebody who doesn't, who's new to all of this, for example, maybe somebody in the community reads through this. I remember talking about this a little bit, but as we've been discussing this, I think Clint and you, Troy, have both mentioned that, as Steve has said, we really have to make sure that our focus is on why we're going to have to make some of the hard decisions that we're making. So I guess I don't disagree with Steve that we don't want to dilute the fact that we do have some serious challenges that are informing some of the decisions we're making.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
on that note, can I just say that, I think that when we start making these difficult decisions to cut programs, I think we will have the community in an uproar, right? Anytime you cut a program that they think is really important. So one of the things that I hope that we will be able to do is we will be able to point to this document and say, these are the strategic priorities that this board has determined is where our county should be. And this is, I think we need to have a strong document that supports our decisions when we start cutting programs. So so I don't think our target audience is just going to be supervisors or even department heads. I think we do need to think about the fact that we're going to start getting people upset when we start cutting programs, and we want to have some place where there's a very specific description of how we are making these decisions.
Buy-in from the community members also,
Right.
because technically this is their document, and Melissa's right, like, we have to do something like that and point to this. Well, this is the document that you supported. We're following those goals you wanted, or the plan that you set forth. So
I don't disagree, I guess. So clarify then, so you're saying that you still believe we need to lead with strengths first?
I don't know that we need to, I don't think we need to belabor them. I think it could be a short paragraph where we just talk about the fact that we do have some good things going for us. It isn't all doom and gloom. I don't think that's a bad thing, while still recognizing that we have some serious challenges and that the serious challenges are going to be our focus, but we're going to continue to try to strengthen our strengths, right? And not just ignore them and have our strengths then become weaknesses. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm not necessarily opposed. Troy, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you'll see strengths in the plan, particularly when it gets down to opportunities around recreation and workforce and that kind of thing. They're not front and center, to be sure. But
Do you think it is a detriment if we do put them first?
I think that there are folks, as I've encountered them, that need to get more in touch with the sense of urgency that's required behind some of the decision making. And I can't tell you how to operate that way. That's not how I operate, but I don't always operate the right way. I'm oftentimes a bit blunt. So I think the sense of urgency is very important, however that's communicated. There's no shortage of assets in the county, though.
Clint?
I don't think I have any comments that haven't been said.
Okay. Great. Well, what would you guys like to do?
Do you want me to draft like just a brief paragraph that we would just put right before this? And then it would lead directly into that the focus of this document will be on acknowledging where we need to work, what we need to work on, and then we would go right into this focus section.
I don't think it hurts, but like I said, and Troy did, is that we gotta make it clear that we got problems to solve.
I'm fine not doing it too. If we don't want to do it, we can just move right into the focus. One of the things we did delete from, so what you're looking at on your screen, we deleted the first paragraph that said the defining problem for the Richland County Board of Supervisors is the need to choose which services and enterprises it will financially support. Continuing inherited practices and commitments challenges the ability to pay for future commitments and needs. So we deleted that sentence to tone it down, but I'm thinking that perhaps we need to add that back in.
I think we should. I think, why don't you draft like a short statement, and if we're gonna relook at mission and vision next time, we can look at when that deleted paragraph is back in, if we have a short statement beforehand, how it works together as a section. Would that be all right?
Yeah, okay, I just added it back in.
Okay.
And then I'll made a note to myself and we don't, I won't spend a lot of time on it because I feel like it may be and maybe it doesn't go here. Maybe it just goes somewhere else too. But I'll draft a short thing that we can decide whether we want to put it here or somewhere else or not at all. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I'll at least get something written. Okay, so hold on, I got to finish writing this
Hey,
real quick.
Melissa, I'm gonna
Yeah.
step out for just one moment. Can you chair for a second?
Oh, sure.
Okay, thank you.
So
Madam Vice, you still have a quorum. You're good to go.
okay, all right, good. All right, so in that focus section, we changed that wording. So I did add the wording back into the defining problem for Richland County Board of Supervisors. I added that back in. The next thing that we really had a question on was this figure. So the one thing we thought was a little confusing about this figure, which is actually what prompted the conversation about the org chart that was previously listed up above, was that it makes it sound like these are like it was a little confusing as to what was being included in this. And I realized that the caption says long-term capital needs by business unit. And these I assume and Troy, you can speak to this, that these were pulled out because these are where there's some really serious questions as to how we can continue to put capital expenditures towards these individual items. Is that what you were thinking? It was really because we were looking at needing to invest large sums of money into these facilities?
Yeah, that's part of it. The other side is these are very distinct, what I would call enterprises, as we might call them in the private sector. Within each department, you may find discretionary services that someone's doing. Clint had mentioned veteran services. There's probably others. A department can be mandated, but discretionary services could occur. These are enterprises that are, to me, very clearly outside of county government departments. And so that's what I was trying to get at. And then on top of that, Melissa, yes, Madam Vice Chair, that the capital expenses tied to them and some operations, I believe.
Right. I mean, except that like the jail and communication towers and emergency services are statutorily required item. Those are not discretionary. Well, I mean, I guess we could say, no, we're not building a new jail, but I don't know what the state does when when your jail falls down and you tell them no.
But they're in service of a mandated government function.
Right. So that's why I was a little confused as to like what was included. I was thinking it was just, these are discretionary things we're involved in that we don't have to be. But I don't know that that's true when it comes to the jail and the radio towers and that. So that's the only reason why I guess I want a little clarification as to, were you specifically thinking that these are discretionary services that we may or may not want to be involved with?
No, I see your point. Probably the Richland County government in the middle and the government on the outside is confusing. The government of Richland County is operating or owning those various pieces. So that's what I was trying to display. 4 of them I was trying to identify as discretionary, very distinct enterprises.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the theme throughout. I mean, they come up very specifically in other sections of our document as well, as far as being discretionary and things we should be looking at as far as our continuation of those services, right?
Yeah, they jumped out at me during the conversations as larger items of discussion.
All right, so I guess what I'd like to hear from committee is, do we want this in its current form? Do we want to make changes to this diagram in its current form? What do we like the way it, I mean, I get what you're trying to do as far as making it very clear that, but what kind of think one of our discussions when it came up was our first reaction was the business of the county, and then it was like, these are the only things we're involved in, and that was where we came to that. Well, then we need an org chart in here that really talks about all the different business of the county, both mandated and non-mandated, all the things we're involved in, and helping people understand how county government works. In order for this one to be more useful. I don't know what other people think of that.
I guess, ironically, I think this is a spot where maybe we don't need a visual. Maybe this is a set of bullet points. The first one saying, these are the mandated things that we do as a county government. And then tick off those 4 things below saying, we also do this, but they are not mandated. So there's a distinction, and it makes it little, the division between government and then these enterprises little easier to see.
I was going to say something similarly, that when I didn't look at the picture and I read the paragraph that described the business of Richland County, it honestly made more sense than when I just first looked at the visual. So I think that the visual can be a bit confusing if, yeah, I guess I agree with Steve. I don't know if we need a list of what we are statutorily required. I know that's further on our agenda too. We're looking at those things. Were you envisioning that we would include that in this written out part of the strategic plan, Melissa?
Oh, you mean as far as defining statutory?
You know, what are things that we are doing that are statutorily required? Do you think that I don't know if that's necessarily necessary to list out right here?
Well, first of all, it's really complicated. I mean, the list is long and it's complicated. The functions that are being provided in our departments, it's pretty long of what, because some of what they do is mandated, some of what they do is not. And so I don't think it would make sense to include that in this document, except to pull out the specific discretionary services or non-statutorily required services that we decide are ones that need to be evaluated as far as our continuation with those programs. So
perhaps sorry.
no, I don't think it makes sense to list every single thing that's statutorily required and everything that's not in this document. I think that would really bog it down. I think we would just pull out the ones that are.
Do you think that we need a further description of what do we mean when we say mandated or statutory versus the things that were in the business or what are considered discretionary, or is it obvious enough in the paragraph that we have?
So just to, so in that paragraph that starts, the primary causes of the county's financial issue stems from an inability to make hard choices and focus efforts. So we left that paragraph intact. But the next one, in addition to and we deleted government function, we put statutory function to help people understand that we are, that the statutes define much of what we do. So that's what we did change it. In addition to its statutory function, Richland County is currently in the business. So if you go down to starting right there. So I'm right here. In addition to its statutory function, Richland County is currently in the business of the Tri-County Airport assignments. So we went on and listed what's in that document, or was in that chart.
Visual.
Yeah. So I think deleting that visual would be fine, because we've now listed them in the text of what we're talking about as far as being not necessarily a statutorily required. And so, and we also then on that last sentence, maintenance, debt service expenditures associated with discretionary enterprises compete for the same levy funding as, and we used to have mandatory services. Instead, we put statutorily required to help people understand what drives us, like what, what are we following when we say that that something is mandatory? Well, it's mandatory because the statutes say it is. Does
Troy, do
that
you
make
feel like
sense?
that captures yes, Melissa, do you feel like that captures the intent of what you were communicating?
Yeah, I do. Hopefully it captures the county's intent as well. Yeah.
I'm good with taking out the visual and leaving it as is. Does anyone else have any thoughts or, I guess, issues with that?
No, no, I'm okay with taking it out because I think that the paragraph itself really does. Yeah, I mean, I guess the question becomes though is, are these the things that we're really going to, I hate to use the word pick on, but are these the discretionary services? Are they the only discretionary services that we're going to talk about? Or are we going to, is there going to be, we might have to change this as we get through this document and make decisions about what discretionary services we think are ones that could potentially be cut.
Should we include language like such as, or for example, or including?
Yeah,
In other
maybe
words,
that would be the
after
way to
it
do
says,
it. Yeah.
is currently in the business by way of its support or ownership of facilities, something about these discretionary services, including or Tri-County Airport, Simons, Pine Valley.
Yeah, I
Something
mean,
like that?
we're obviously sending a really strong message about what's on the chopping block, right? Right now.
And I think these are very distinct enterprises. I mean, you could literally take a meat cleaver and lop these things off very cleanly.
You could what?
Take a meat cleaver and just separate them from the county, right? They're almost incorporated probably as 501s or some other incorporation. And
Well, I don't think that's true of Pine Valley though.
Okay.
Because Pine Valley, we have a $20 million debt, and we think our latest information is we could maybe get 10 million if we sold it. And so, how could we take a $10 million loss? And so, I mean, it's not necessarily just a matter of cutting it off. Everything would be fine.
No, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that. I guess to go back to what I was trying to get at, and to Clint's point, that veteran services may do non-mandatory stuff. They may, in fact, have very high value. And if you have a one-person department, then they can get the mandatory and non-mandatory value-driven stuff done. That's the thing we have to tease out. That's kind of the
Yeah, and then
Yeah, I think Troy's point is legally we can separate from it. Financially, does it make the best sense for us is probably a different question that we have to evaluate with
Which is
all
back
of our
to the
services. And comes back to then too, where
statutory
it's
versus not.
correct. And then with it also is that, yes, you may have departments that are quite heavily performing mandated types of services, but there's other functions that they could be doing that or might not be mandated by any type of state or federal code, but are highly desired and or established through resolution or ordinance.
yeah, and by the same token, these distinct things, I still don't know how much money it would save. At some point, that's got to be part of the decision process. Is not like just these distinct non-mandatory things, but even in the mandatory stuff, is there latitude to reduce service somewhat, but not completely? I mean, again, if we're going to balance a budget, these are prime candidates, but even with our mandated stuff, we're going to have to look at it.
Right. So I think we're all kind of on the same page here. It's just a matter of the language here. Do you think we need to include, because to Melissa's point, these are not necessarily the only non-statutory or business things that are out there, correct?
We have an ambulance. They have an ambulance.
So I guess that goes back to, do we need to, I guess, clarify that a little bit, where it doesn't look like this is just the final list?
Yes, I think you should have an et cetera in there somewhere to make it not all inclusive is in here.
Okay.
The other thing is that we're providing a fare, not mandated to have
Right.
a fare.
So there's multiple things that
Yeah.
are not listed here.
So do you want me to leave it as it was, where it would say, in addition to its statutory function, Richland County is currently in the business of the Tri-County Airport, Simons, Pine Valley, and UW Platteville, Richland, etc., by way of its support or ownership of facilities used in these sectors?
I think that would be fine.
Or
By simply putting the et cetera in there, we're indicating that this
Or-
is not.
as examples, but not all inclusive. Yeah, however it's best wordsmithed.
Okay, I can mess around with that a little bit too. Okay, yeah, I think that makes more sense than just moving that part to the end because it didn't read very well when I tried to do that.
Thank you for being our wordsmith, Melissa.
No problem. Okay, so then the only next thing that we changed was, okay, so I'm just going to read the whole paragraph just so we can hear it as it flows. In addition to its statutory function, Richland County is currently in the business of Tri-County Airport, Simons, Pine Valley, and UW Platteville, Richland, etc., by way of its support or ownership of facilities used in these sectors. Maintenance, debt, services, expenditures associated with discretionary enterprises compete for the same level funding as statutorily required services and impact the county's ability to fully fund its core operations. I think that sounds pretty good now. Are we good? Are you guys all there?
I'm sorry. I'm thinking. Yes, maybe it's like when you look at something too much, it starts to. I'm wondering, do we need something like in the business of discretionary? I know we use that term later. Discretionary enterprises such as Tri-County Airport, Simons, and so forth. Would that make it more clear, or is this just a case of me looking at it too much?
Either one works.
You think it's fine the way she stated it then?
The way
Okay.
she had it.
All right,
yeah.
then let's just not.
Just briefly, it's
Yes, I
quarter
see
after
that.
2 and there's a meeting here at 3. So
I know. Thank you. Let's just, okay, so the last little tiny bit was this considerations, and then we're going to pause after that because this is the end of this particular part of the document. So Melissa, if you want to keep going there.
Yep. Okay. So under considerations, the only thing that we changed in that first sentence is we felt like it shouldn't be the county should answer. And the whole point of our strategic plan is to say what we will do. And so we just changed that first sentence from when facing difficult decisions, the county will answer the following questions to prioritize investments. So and we felt like those questions are all really good and important, and I think are helpful in helping, whenever we're looking at how to make a decision, these are all great questions to be asking ourselves. Does anyone have any issues with any of those bulleted points, or think we should change them, delete them, add more?
I think they're fine, and we can always add more criteria later if we need to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've kind of been trying to keep these questions in front of me when we've been having our budget discussions, just trying to really keep my mind focused on these, making sure I'm getting answers to these questions. So I felt they've been really helpful. Okay, that was it for this first document.
Okay, so Melissa,
yeah,
if you're okay, I'm going to have us pause there, and I just want to discuss quickly. I knew we were probably not going to get through all of this today, but number 8 on the agenda. I'm sorry, did you have something, Melissa?
No, I was going to say I agree that, I think we have a lot to talk about on these, and it's okay to do it over multiple meetings.
One of like 4 documents. Okay, so number 8, Clint, the discussion and possible action on strategic initiatives impacting future county budgets. And you had put in a document there. Is that something that we kind of need to discuss today because it might impact your future decisions here?
It's your discretion, Madam Chair. If you wanted to talk about it today, if it was tabled until a later meeting, that would be fine as well.
Okay. How about you, Melissa? The number 7, I think that was going to come to you. Is that something we could table for next time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've got quite a ways into it, but I'm not ready. So that would be perfect.
Okay.
So time.
Okay, so we're going to push that then to next time. I do want to jump down and at least look at number 8, even if we don't get through making a decision, but I want us to visualize it together. So Number 8 is discussion and possible action on strategic initiatives impacting future county budgets. Clint had put in a document for us. Clint, if you want to walk us through that would be great.
Let me pull up on the screen here, Madam Chair. Looking today for a motion to incorporate into the strategic plan financial recommendations on initiatives impacting future county services and expenditures, which may result in recommendations to the board to evaluate solvency and or to separate with non-mandated services. Essentially looking to gauge in your scope of items that you want to address with this committee and with this plan, of getting into evaluating mandated departments with non-mandated services and departments that are essentially non-mandated. This would be, again, engaging the scope, much like we talked about today on, is it in your scope to evaluate the organizational structure of our county bodies? So as a strategic planning committee determines its scope of planning the topics it hopes to address in developing the strategic financial plan, it is proposed that the committee entertain recommending evaluation of non-mandated discretionary services and possibly recommended evaluations and separations of services in context of continual budget constraints, growing deferred capital improvements, and increased costs to operate mandated services. Attached are draft resolution examples that may be considered in directing services to find solvency or to separating from county control. The first draft depicts language to study and present a plan of solvency. The second draft depicts a separation from county control. Both examples are drafts and can be amended to best meet desires of the board and features of the department or services. So below this, Madam Chair, then you'll see two different drafted examples. The first one states the whereas and list in there language from resolution number 101, which is continue to develop a strategic plan and present to the county board. Second whereas statement is where the Richland County's recent borrowing practices, audit reports, and budget constraints have consistently indicated a need for the county to prioritize services and begin evaluation and displacement of non-mandated services impacting operational levy and debt service levy expenditures. And whereas the county has received numerous petitions and concerns in regarding the elimination, reduction, or disposition of highly valued, again, it should be non-mandated services, and recognizes the importance of these services to the community. Now therefore be it resolved that Richland County Board of Supervisors directs the following actions and timelines to be implemented in efforts to evaluate the insert department, insert whether it's a service, a ground, a facility, equipment, etc., and to plan for operating without impacts on the county operations levy or debt service levy. Then the actions then below are Richland County structure resolution depicting committee boards and commissions, duties and authorities is hereby amended to include the following bullet. And the structure document, again, is what lays out all of our different committees and what their authorities and their purposes are. So we would add a bullet of the blank oversight committee or board or commission is tasked to work in conjunction with the county administrator and supporting staff to evaluate, again, the name of the department and then the function within the department, determine the best way, if all possible, to continue services with zero future dependency on county operational levy and debt service levy for capital improvements beginning in 2023. The county administrator is authorized to allocate, and this again is to the department or a function of it, a dollar amount in American Rescue Plan funding to study the development of a credible county board adopted business plan, which could be an operations agreement, partnership agreement, etc., that reasonably ensures solvent revenue generating operations that result in zero future dependency on county operational levy or county or debt service levy for capital improvements beginning in 2023. Be it further resolved that if such a plan is not adopted by the county board no later than August 16th, 2022, the county administrator is tasked with dissolving, again, the department and or the functions thereof, effective the first of the following year by eliminating county funding, releasing necessary staff, preparing necessary policy changes, and appropriating or liquidating all assets, grounds, equipments, and facilities in the best interest of the county. Now, keep in mind, each department has different functions, different pieces, all these different things. So this is, again, just kind of a cookie cutter to start priming the pump on if this is something that a road that you visualize this committee going down. The second drafted language has the same, about the same whereas language, but then now this one is kind of directed a little bit more sharper into a prepare for a separation from the county. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Board of Supervisors directs the following actions and timelines to be implemented in the separation of the blank department, again, services, grounds, facilities, equipment, from Richland County Control Funding and Liability effective January 1st, 2023. Be it further resolved that Richland County's structure resolution depicting the committee, boards, and commissions is hereby amended to include the following bullet. The blank oversight committee is tasked to work in conjunction with the county administrator and supporting staff to plan the discontinuation of the then blank department, ground services, equipment, etc., effective January 1st, 2023, with elimination of county funds, separation of staff, development of necessary policy changes, separation procedures, and the disposition or liquidation of all assets, grounds, equipment, and facilities in efforts to maintain services, if feasible, and aligning with the best interests of the county. So it's saying we're going to be outside of county control. Disposition of everything is, if it's still feasible to carry on as its own legal entity underneath a different umbrella, that would be the intentions. Be it further resolved, the county administrator is authorized to allocate to that department that function number of dollars from the American Rescue Plan to assist insolvency during the transition out of county control, if services will be provided underneath another legal entity. Be it further resolved that plan of separation from county control and future dispositions of services will be presented to the county board no later than 16 August 2022. So these were put in here just as examples, but the real decision that I'm looking for from your committee today, Madam Chair, is this something that you're taking on with the strategic plan and then the follow-up of kind of implementing it, bringing recommendations to a finance and personnel committee or to a county board? Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So Mr. Langrick, I just want to, just for my own clarification here. So what I get from the first document is it would be, we would send out, this is basically authorizing us to send out to a department, asking them to look at all of their services and then define which ones are mandatory or not mandatory or statutorily required, and then come up with an idea, come up with a plan as to how they would be able to continue that service without impacting our budget. Is that in a nutshell kind of what the first one is asking?
Yes, the first one is kind of set in place. So if you need to come back with a plan, a credible plan that the county board is going to have enough confidence in to accept that you're going to be able to operate in the future without operational levy and without debt service levy. So that includes then being able to keep up with all capital infrastructure pieces. The second one then is more geared towards a separation from county control.
Right. So the first one seems like it could be incredibly helpful for us in making decisions as to which services we would keep or not keep. And so I think that's your hope, is that by having departments do this exercise, we would then be able to look to see which ones are at least specifically from the financial aspect. Now, this doesn't take into consideration those that provide a service that they can't get reimbursed for, but it's an important service that the county needs to provide to its citizens, whether it's mandatory or not. Am I making sense?
Was that a question or a statement?
Well, yeah, I mean, the question, I guess my question is this document, you're envisioning that we would send this out and essentially make the departments, really tell us whether whether they could find a financial way to support this program without asking for levy, whether it's in the form of a borrowed money or whatever.
I would see, if I can interrupt you just very
Yep, go
quickly,
ahead.
Madam Vice. I would see these resolutions in place as multiple steps down the road. I think, as we just talked about with the evaluation questions of through the focus on, that there's decision criteria that kind of go into place. Through those decision criteria, then, if we're going to evaluate non-mandated services, and we have some then that are scoring higher or lower depending on how we're evaluating the questions, or if there is a scoring type of a method, then now we've reached a point where, okay, now what are we going to do with these? We've evaluated these, we've answered the questions of, if we weren't doing these today, would we start doing them? And, we went through that list. These are the ones that have really kind of come to queue as of being, least answering these criteria points. Now, what do we want to do with them? Well, these would be the resolution languages of how you want to approach it. If you want to say, they come back with a plan for us on how this is still going to work, where it's under county control, but it's zero levy impact, or if it's determined of, what, this kind of really isn't working out, we want to posture you and get you in a position to be successful either as your own entity or underneath some other type of nonprofit or some other type of a thing. Here's some seed money to try to get yourself positioned, as we are going to kind of separate in ways going into the following year, is the vision behind the two documents.
And Melissa, I would just add, I think, and I don't know if this is what you were stating, but it does give room, as he was saying, to, within a department, specify specifically which, that was redundant, but anyways, to specifically state which services we're looking at. If, it doesn't have to be an across the board look at every service. If I'm understanding this document correctly, we could specify certain services.
Yes, many things can be changed in this document. I'm just trying to lay out the tools of, now that we've, if you're going through the efforts of then evaluating, okay, now what do we do? We've evaluated and we've decided that these are the ones we want to take a look at, or these are the ones that we thinking are less of priorities than other ones. So now you have two tools kind of in your toolbox of, hey, we can go this road with you, or we can kind of go this road with you. But yes, it's laid out right now with the language where you may have a department, and not to pick on any of the departments at this conversation, but say you have a health and human services department, you have a function over there of, many of the different divisions. You want to identify one that's not mandated, but it's valued, and you're cued in on that one, versus if you're taking more of a department in its totality, and not to pick on anyone again, but like a Simon's type of a function, the whole operation is discretionary, it's non-mandated, and you're kind of, you're looking at an entire department. And maybe maybe there's other sub-functions underneath assignments as well, but it's open to both.
So in that sense, I feel like, especially the first one, but potentially the second one, is very useful as we get into looking at those more in depth and implementing this work plan, in my opinion. Yes, Steve.
Questions?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the ARP a couple times, and I wondered if you could explain why that's in here, and whether this is a one-time help function.
Right now, we have money queued in the American Rescue Plan for revenue replacement, and that gives us some discrepancy of what we would like to do with it. Some of the things, though, that the language in the overall federal context says is for continuation of services. But if you visualize it as, we want to continue to the services, I feel that everything that we're doing, even in a discretionary sense, has a lot of value to the community. So you're using this one-time use ARP funds to seed and separate a function that we know is valued, but we cannot support anymore on tax base, or you're using that monies to, hey, we need to invest this to find a way for you to be able to operate with less levy impact and staying in our control. About $1.6 million is kind of queued as lost revenue, but even out of that, we're already starting to find committed projects towards it. So that 1.6 has already got about $4 million of recommendations on where to be spent. So some of it we would want to earmark and have an idea on those departments, a reasonable amount of what it takes for consulting to reasonably consult and find solutions, or what their operations are to seed them for a 1 year, a 2 year, a 3 year thing. If you're out of the nest, here's some money to try to make it work until you can establish revenues to make it work for yourself.
But you're confident this kind of step would be qualified under the ARP?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
And then my second question, I'm trying to think of the decision flow. This is like a tool to do that, but the decisions beforehand and through which committees would this flow through, and where do we fit in that? That's what I'm not clear on.
I don't have a clear answer on that as well. I think it starts with the strategic plan and incorporating those languages into that, getting a plan adopted, and then deciding through your review element on how you want to review the different departments. I guess in my purposes of kind of going to the end of the game is saying, this is what the end state's going to look like, Steve, and the decision point that's going to be made by the county board. Once this thing is kind of passed, we're on the road to, it's got to sink or float, or we're on the road to, you know, we're going to try to get you in the best position you can to serve on your own. So again, my question here today was really, is this something that you have the appetite in the scope of your work with this committee to take on?
Okay. Do you guys have further thoughts? Do you want to make a decision today or look over these and discuss this again next time?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Melissa.
So I actually think this is a really good document. I mean, I think this is the direction we want to head. We want to be making these very specific decisions. I mean, I was just reading part one, under the first draft resolution, item 1, where it says Richland County structure resolution depicting yada, yada, yada. I mean, and where it says the oversight committee board or commission is tasked to work in conjunction with the county administrator and supporting staff to evaluate the department. I mean, that's kind of what I've been wanting from these questions we're asking, you know, where we want, I guess my point is I wouldn't mind having them go through this exercise to help us figure out which things should really be targeted as potentially not continuing. Because if I'm understanding Administrator Langrick, what he's saying is once we would make a decision about which we probably want to discontinue, and then we would have them go through this process after that, once we've made that decision. But I'm just wondering if that first paragraph, especially where it talks about directing the oversight committee to work with the department to actually answer these questions. I don't know. I think that would be really helpful in us making the decision. Is that making sense to anyone but me?
If the context is to put this in every oversight committee's things to do, the challenge I would have is it says kind of in conjunction with myself, and I don't know if in the next 6 months I'm going to have the ability and the capacity to also evaluate. I mean, I think it's really the conversation probably has to start with the ones that you know are discretionary, and then start talking about the departments that are mandated but are performing discretionary services on top.
I like what you're saying, Melissa, but I would kind of agree. I think that would be a very large task, particularly for some of the departments. But maybe it's something we need to look at when we're talking about how we're going to solicit information from the department heads at our next meeting. Maybe utilizing this a bit more. Yes.
Sure. My impression was that Clinton's drafted a tool that is at the end of a decision process. It may not be used that many times. We don't even know for sure. So I did not see this as being spread out to every.
No, I would, but I think what Melissa's saying, we could look at, the information that we would actually garner from this, and maybe looking at how could we get some of that information to help inform our decisions about what's discretionary. So I think we're not saying to change this particular thing. So in interest of time, I guess, in my opinion, I think we should read over these and then do possible action at the next meeting, unless someone has an opposing view on that. No? Okay. So thank you, Clint. We'll make sure we continue that next time. Future agenda items. Anybody have anything they would like added on to?
I feel like we have plenty with what we're leaving on the table today.
I would agree. Okay, so then that brings us to number 10, but I would like to discuss when we would like to adjourn to.
Did you want to start with some recommendations?
Yes, please. I'm pulling out my calendar.
Yeah, I'm pulling up mine too. Does this day and time work on a fairly regular basis for people, or no?
For me, it would. Clint would be the question. So if we're doing bi-weekly, that would be like this.
The 16th?
On a Thursday?
Right.
I have a morning meeting on the 16th, but the afternoon is open.
Madam Chair, I'm open in the afternoon at 1 o'clock again.
Okay. Steve,
Sorry.
you said you're open. Steve, would you be open?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That was not that difficult. All right, then my next question is, would the committee prefer to continue meeting in person like this with the option for WebEx?
I prefer in person.
Okay. No, we're asking.
I
This
mean, I'm
continues
gonna,
to be-
I'm gonna
Go
be
ahead.
joining virtually, but if you, I don't mind doing it this way, as long as it worked for you guys to be able to hear me and work the way we've been working, I'm okay with it.
You were crystal clear for us, so,
Yeah, and I could hear all of you. Clint was the only one that I was a little bit quiet, but I could hear him the whole time.
okay. Then I guess we'll plan next time to continue it in this format, if that's all right. So that'll be Thursday, the 16th at 1 p.m.
My only question is having it at 1, does that mean that Steve Williamson is not gonna be able to make it?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you have any ideas?
Steve mentioned that it is a challenge for him to meet middays. After 3 is his preference. 3 o'clock on that day is property. Richard's committee.
On the 16th is property, or is today the property?
Correction, yeah. It wouldn't be the next one, it'd be the following one. Yep.
So could we potentially do it? I would prefer it not be right at 3. Could we do, yeah. I would hate for Steve Williamson to miss every meeting.
So are you proposing, what time are you proposing?
Well, for me, I would need it to be like 3:30. Would that?
Fine with me. I mean, that would still get Clint, that would get him at least out not too late.
Yep, I work for you, Madam Chair.
Good to hear.
He said he works for me, which does not tell me his feelings on the matter. Perhaps, why don't we try that next time and see, well, we could ask Steve then at that meeting and look at future meeting times from there, because if you feel like that's gonna work better for Steve, I know he's not here.
Your kids in sports?
You're asking me, Supervisor? No, Thursday night's piano though, but we're not in sports. I can.
Did Steve say he could not make it when it's at 1 p.m.?
Correct. He said his best availability is going to be after 3, especially during the seed season where
Okay.
they're doing all the cropping right now.
What about the 15th so that Clint doesn't have conflict with his kid's schedule?
I'll make it work if we're WebEx.
Actually, that works better for me than Thursday.
Okay.
I have tutoring on Thursdays. So would Wednesday work for you guys?
Works for me.
Harry?
It's in the afternoon, probably.
Yeah, so I'm thinking 3:30 on Wednesday.
I get off work at 7 in the morning.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Steve, does that work for you? 3:30 Wednesday the 15th?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
Let's do that.
let's do that then. How's that looking for you, Troy?
It's good. I'm in Shullsburg at 6:30, so I'll dial in remote.
Is the boardroom available? Stacy doesn't.
Oh,
I don't have that up.
thank you. Very good.
Yeah, we might have work. Jury trial. Is that have to check if it's on there? We can adjust to possibly to HHS. I guess I don't know if they have clinic over there. Clinic on Wednesdays. That would put us then at let me run down and check. Be right back, Madam Chair. We are good. 15 that is open. That is the beginning of Yom Kippur, though, from what I understand. Works very well.
I thought it was American Hispanic Heritage Month. That's the day.
Well, I think we'll go with that because I don't hear any objections. All right, then I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Favor, say
Second.
yes. Sarah, second. All those in favor signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Aye. Thank you. See you next time.